On the News Channel 5 network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. The U.S. Supreme Court always generates lots of news and usually controversy when it issues its final decisions and ends its term each June. That was certainly true this year, especially with the announcement also of the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy. That would seem to top it all. We've asked Vanderbilt Professor of Law Brian Fitzpatrick to join us on Inside Politics this week to assess the historical appointments of the 30 years that Anthony Kennedy spent on the nation's highest court, what his continuing legacy might be, and Mr. Fitzpatrick's thoughts about the politically bruising fight and expensive fight that seems to lie ahead to confirm Justice Kennedy's successor. Professor Fitzpatrick, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You know, it had been rumored that Justice Kennedy was likely to step down, but when it happened, it was like a thunderbolt. I think it says a lot about how important he's been on the court the last 30 years.
No doubt about it. The Supreme Court in general is our most important political institution, in my opinion. They get the final say on so many of our public policy questions, and he was, as we all know, the swing vote. So what Justice Kennedy thought is pretty much what happened with that issue.
And so often he would do things that would delight conservatives and other times make them less than happy, and the same thing on the liberal side. What was his political philosophy? Because it's where he could sort of go, if not down the middle, at least kind of not necessarily follow a particular stand all the time.
You know, unlike the other justices, I think that Justice Kennedy really saw himself as something of a statesman rather than just an interpreter of the law, and I think he really tried hard to come up with decisions that he thought would be best for the country in every circumstance. And so that led him to not necessarily follow any particular jurisprudence or ideology. He just tried to do what he thought was best. You
once served as a clerk in the Supreme Court to Justice Anton Scalia. Did you also get to know Justice Kennedy while you were there? What are your memories and thoughts about him?
I did. You know, he is a very reserved and dignified person. You know, he doesn't have the color that, say, a Justice Scalia did. He's keeps things much more close to his vest. And again, I really got the impression from him and talking to him that he really saw himself as a statesman, not just a judge, but someone who wanted to improve the country.
And he didn't like being called the swing vote. He really didn't like, he said, I don't swing, I don't change.
He did say that. He said, I don't swing, the cases swing. But he did swing. he often did not make up his mind until the very end.
Did he like being called the decider any better? That was another nickname he had because he was so often the fifth vote in the 5-4.
Yeah, you know, not so much this term, but in previous terms, whenever there were 5-4 decisions, he was in the vast majority of those 5-4 decisions. And so he really was the deciding vote in so many important cases.
Being a statesman on the court, which you say he saw himself, is that a dying breed on the court? Is that not going to be there anymore? It doesn't appear with whoever President Trump nominates, they're going to be right of him, maybe consistently more right of where Justice Kennedy was. So is that going to be the end of an era?
I think it is the end of the era in terms of conservative judges. On the right, the judicial philosophy now is one that's very tightly focused on interpreting the law. It's not to try to make the country better. It's really just follow the words, follow the intentions of the people that wrote the words, and don't worry about the consequences.
We don't know who the president will nominate at this point, but it does appear whoever he puts on will be further right of Justice Kennedy. Are we building, is the president now building with just his second appointment to the court a conservative majority that will live for some time on the court?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I think Trump knows this. This is the most important thing he's going to do while he's president. The Supreme Court is going to outlast him by decades. These people he puts on the court are going to be there for a long time. And I'm very confident he's going to find someone very conservative, and that'll make Chief Justice Roberts the new swing vote. And that's quite a change from Justice Kennedy.
I saw an article that you were quoted in from The Guardian that was written back in May. First, the indication was there was a quote in there, I think, from the law dean out at Cal Berkeley, who said that if President Trump got a second choice on the court, that it might make the court the most conservative since the 1930s. Only thing I know about the Supreme Court in the 1930s is they struck down several of the New Deal bills, and they also was the one that Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack to try to limit their. Do you agree? Is it going to be that kind of a conservative Supreme Court?
Well, I don't know if they're going to be striking down a lot of legislation that we like,
maybe reversing previous.
But I think it's going to be a very conservative court, and it very well may be as conservative as those courts. I'm not sure they're going to use their powers in the same way the earlier courts did, but it very well could be the most conservative since then.
Some previous decisions that might be back under question again, because they were 5-4 decisions in many cases, was first Roe v. Wade and abortion rights, and also gay rights. Do you believe the court, if it acts in that direction, again, we don't know who the nominee is going to be, will try to do that in a reversal in one big case, or will they do it gradually over time as cases come up to the court?
Unlike a lot of the commentators that we've seen since Kennedy announced his retirement, I do not think these iconic decisions like Roe v. Wade are under any threat by a new Supreme Court justice. And the reason is this. The Supreme Court is a conservative institution, not just politically, but institutionally. They don't like to make dramatic changes, especially high-profile dramatic changes. Roe v. Wade is built into our political DNA at this point. They're not going to overturn that decision until there's a social consensus to do so. So I can't imagine Chief Justice Roberts joins a majority opinion overturning Roe. The
gay marriage, gay rights decisions, but they've been there on the books a very short period of time as compared to Roe v. Wade back in the 70s.
That's true. They've not been there a long time, but they would cause tremendous turmoil if we got rid of gay marriage all of a sudden. We have all of these gay couples that are married now. What is going to happen to them? It's too big of a change, and the court's just not going to do it.
Somewhere down the road there'll be Senate hearings about this before senators in committee, and the question that will be asked to feel out these justices about this is whether they think things like Roe v. Wade or the gay marriage thing are quote-unquote settled law. But justices increasingly that are nominated don't like to answer those questions. Is that one they're going to have to answer?
It's true. They do not like to tell the Senate how they're inclined to rule on particular cases. Part of that is because there are ethical rules that discourage them from prejudging a potential case that might come before them. So they're reluctant to do that. They will usually say, though, that things are settled law, because they are settled law. That doesn't mean they can't overrule them, but they are settled law. So it's an easy way for them to get out of the question is by saying they're settled law.
We don't know exactly what the process is the president is using. It may be he's doing individual interviews with the finalists. The situation going on with the Mueller investigation, are we likely to see some questions about that, about what did the president say to you about that? Because whoever this new justice is may well be in a situation where he or she has to rule on things coming out of the Mueller investigation about whether you can subpoena presidents, whether you can even indict a president. This is a little bit more ticklish situation than we normally have, even though all Supreme Court nomination situations are ticklish.
I think you're right. I think the senators will be interested to learn what President Trump and his people asked the nominees about during the vetting process, but President Trump people are not stupid, and they know that they should not ask any questions like that for this very reason, and so they won't.
Vanderbilt law professor Brian Fitzpatrick is our guest. We're talking about the Supreme Court with the resignation or the retirement this week of Justice Anthony Kennedy and the fight that may lie ahead over who takes his place on the court. Back to continue our conversation after this break.